Yo, what is going on YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and we are continuing our season preview videos as we are taking a look north of the border at the Montreal Canadiens. So the Montreal Canadiens, the story is pretty clear across the board. This team is in the midst of a rebuild. If you're new to this, the Montreal Canadiens are in a rebuild, and you know, the way I look at the Montreal Canadiens going into this season, there's reason for optimism. There's a team that's got a couple of new, younger players that are either guys they've traded for this offseason or young defensemen we're going to see start to develop a little bit more, building off of last season. And maybe we'll even see a young goalie prospect at some point. But the way I kind of look at the Montreal Canadiens is this is a team you need very low expectations. Not necessarily for the players that are on the ice, but for the product in terms of the standings. Because the reality is, this team does not have the depth to go on a playoff run. I just don't see it. Unless something miraculous happens here, this roster on paper is not going to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. And, you know, hopefully, you know what, for Montreal Canadiens fans, I hope they look at this video in March and April when they're trying to go to that cup run and get themselves back in the playoffs. But the reality is, this team just isn't there yet. And that's okay, because that is the expectation of the Montreal Canadiens here for the next couple of seasons. Yeah, the patience is a pain in the neck, I get that, but teams have had to wait much longer to get back to the Stanley Cup final or ever, so the Montreal Canadiens are a little spoiled in that regard. But I understand the frustration. But looking at this team, you know, looking up front at the forwards, it's pretty clear. This is a team that's definitely got a lot of younger players that don't have a ton of experience. But there's some players that are coming back that were there last season. Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Kirby Dach, Josh Anderson, Christian Dvorak, Jake Evans, Brendan Gallagher, Yoel Armia, Sean Monahan. And then a couple of younger players we saw a little bit last season, but we hope to see a little more of this year, including guys like Jarosz Lakovsky, Raphael Harvey-Pinard, are just some of those guys. The new addition, and that's really the big addition the Habs made this summer, was bringing in Alex Newhook. Alex Newhook won a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche a few seasons ago, and he's been a good piece there. I think he's been one of those guys that I've really enjoyed watching, and is the type of player that if I'm the Montreal Canadiens fan, I'd be pretty excited to see some of these guys come in. According to Cap Friendly, they also have Michael Pezzetta, who we saw a little bit last year, and Jesse Ylönen coming in, the young 23-year-old forward. So, going to be exciting to see another. Hopefully, this will be a full season of Jesse Ylönen in the NHL, as he's now going into his fourth pro season. So, hopefully, things work out for him here in the NHL. But again, there's no guarantees, especially with a younger player like that. On the blue line, the defense is interesting. I'm not going to say it's a good defense, but there's a lot of developing guys here. So, Michael Matheson, David Savard, let's get those guys out of the way. Chris Weidman, those are your defensemen that are your veterans, the bedrock of this blue line. And everything around that is either extremely young or just inexperienced at the NHL level. So we have Jordan Harris. Jordan Harris, I believe he played at Northeastern. Yes, he did. He'll be going into his third season in the National Hockey League. You know, he's not a point-producing defenseman, but his production definitely improved from last year to his first season in the NHL, so that'll be year 3 now for Jordan Harris. Hopefully we see him for a full 82-game schedule. Gustav Lindstrom is a guy that you've probably heard of before. He spent the last couple years in Detroit with the Red Wings. He played a little bit with the Grand Rapids Griffins. He had some injury issues last year, only playing 36 games with the Red Wings, and I think that's a part of the reason Yzerman let him go. But he is still 24 years old, making entry-level contract money. I think that could be a really good signing for the Habs, but we'll see if he could stay healthy. Justin Barron, the former Halifax Moosehead, going into his third NHL season. We know the story with him. He was a Colorado Avalanche guy. Comes into Montreal, put up 15 points in 39 games with the Habs. Hopefully he is able to build on that. But again, he's got to be healthy. Only playing 39 games last season. He bounced around between the AHL with the Laval Rocket and the World Championship. So hopefully they get him in one place and he's able to just settle in. And that's the hope for the 21-year-old defenseman. And as we all know, defensemen do take time to develop. So keep an eye on Justin Barron this season. Caden Gooley, another one. He's another 21-year-old defenseman. He played his first season in the NHL last year. A big Western Canadian boy. Definitely keeping an eye on him. 6'2", 205 at 21 years old. So that's a big boy right there. So keep an eye on Caden Gooley. Jonathan Kovacevic. I think that's how you say it. Kovacevic. Let me know down below. Is that how you say it? Jonathan Kovacevic? That sounds right, but you guys will let me know. A 26-year-old defenseman. Played with Winnipeg 2 seasons ago. Spent all of last season with the Habs. So this will be year 2 in Montreal. So keep an eye on Kovacevic. In between the pipes, kind of an interesting situation here. You've got Jake Allen, Casey DeSmith, and Samuel Montembeault. Montembeault had a really good season last year and was one of the few bright spots for the Montreal Canadiens. So the expectation is he will continue to build off of what he did last season. Really good numbers considering how bad the Habs were. He had a .901 save percentage, played 40 games last season. So the expectation is he'll kind of follow that up and hopefully build on what he did last season. And considering he is 26 years old. He is still in his prime, so hopefully that works out. Casey DeSmith, don't really expect to see him. In all honesty, he has not been. He's not been a guy I would be too excited about. He did play 38 games last year for the Penguins. The season before that, in 2020 and 2021, 2022, he had an above .910 save percentage each of those seasons. So in 14 games in his rookie season, he had a .921 save percentage, a .916, a .912, and a .914. And the weird thing is, his numbers have always been better in the NHL than they ever were in the AHL, which is kind of weird. I don't know how that worked out. Some goalies are like that. Like, they just tend to play better in the NHL than the AHL. But last season, his numbers dipped pretty bad, and he had above a 3 goals against average, which isn't good enough, and that's part of the reason that he is no longer in Pittsburgh, and the Penguins decided to go a new direction, but keep an eye out for that. Now, they do have a couple of pretty big injuries to start the season. Now, technically, in technicality, Carey Price is on the LTIR, but we know the situation there. He will not be playing in the NHL again. He just can't announce that. Arbor Xhekaj is listed on the injured reserve. Hopefully he'll be back before training camp, but there's no guarantees there. Juraj Slafkovsky, similar situation. He's been on the IR. Sean Monahan and Cole Caulfield. So hopefully some of those guys will be back for opening night for the Montreal Canadiens, but they are listed on the injured reserve. So that's also something to watch for. In terms of young players to watch here, there's a bunch on the Montreal Canadiens. Philip Mazar, who was I believe a first or second round pick. It was a first round pick in 2022. Another guy we saw a little bit last season, Sean Farrell. Keep an eye on some other guys like Riley Kidney, Owen Beck, Jan Mysek. Those are just some of their forward prospects that we've seen a little bit here and there. David Reinbacher, we hope, plays in the NHL, but I would expect him to spend most of the season with the Laval Rocket. I think that Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens, especially considering he's a defenseman, especially considering they have other defensive prospects that are probably higher up than him at this point, just because of their age, that's going to allow him to develop and not put so much pressure on him for this season. Matthias Norlinder, William Trudeau, Nicholas Baudin, and even Logan Mailloux, who, that was from the other day. Gary Bettman announced that Logan Mailloux will be allowed to play in the NHL, and he is a Montreal Canadiens draft pick. So we expect him to be playing this season for the Habs, whether that's in Laval or with the Montreal Canadiens. And, there's always the hope for some of these younger goalie prospects. Jacob Dobes and Caden Primo, might see a little bit of them this season. Maybe a little more Primo than Dobes. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but you guys will let me know. In terms of my expectations for the Habs, I think it's going to be similar to last season. They had 36 wins last year with 68 points, I think, was what they had. Something like that. Yeah, they're going to be right around there again this year. I'm going to go off on a limb and say anywhere between 30 to 35 wins. The Montreal Canadiens are in that rebuild mode. They don't have a ton of depth, and the guys that are at the top of the lineup are fairly young. Definitely watch for some of those guys like Nick Suzuki. Cole Caulfield missed a large portion of last season. Expect him to come back healthy, ready to go. I'm excited to see him. I want to see the emergence of guys like Alex Newhook, guys like Juraj Slafkovsky, he had a really tough season last year for the Habs. Expect him to be better. My guy to watch, though, for the Habs is Alex Newhook. I think Newhook is a really good player there. That's a good pickup they got from the Avalanche. They paid a premium, a first and a second round pick for this guy. I think it was well worth it, though. That's a guy that can come in and add some real important center depth. And if he is going to be as good as we think he could be, the idea of him and Nick Suzuki as your 1-2 punch in the future, that could be a really good steal for the Montreal Canadiens, and that's my prediction. So my prediction is anywhere between 30 to 35 wins for the Habs, 60 to 70 points. I'll say 65 to 70 points, somewhere around there, and that's about it for the Habs. So, guys, let me know what you think down below of the Habs. Of course, make sure to watch our other videos here on the season preview series. We've got a ton of videos already and a ton coming up here before opening night, so stay tuned for the rest of those videos. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.